And going back to our lead story on EU chief in New Delhi, with sizable party from the European Union's College of Commissioners accompanying her, we are looking at more than 20 senior political leaders from EU member states and von der Leyen. They will be meeting Prime Minister Modi tomorrow. The trip comes a day after US President Donald Trump said that he would impose 25% tariffs on imports from the EU, and India looking to bolster its ties with the EU. So what does each side hope to gain and what's on the agenda? We are joined by a special panel of guests. Let me welcome Ms. Chitra Subramaniam, international policy expert, journalist, author, joining us all the way from Geneva. Geneva being the center of Europe and home of European headquarters of the United Nations. Thank you so much, Chitra ma'am, for taking out time for DD India, and always a pleasure to have Professor Manoj Pant. Namaste, sir. Seasoned economist and former Vice Chancellor of IIFT joining us on the broadcast. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much. I'm going to quickly start with Chitra ji. Very quickly, overall significance for both sides, the timings and the broader agenda. There's a sense that we are looking at more trade-centric talks with an EU-India trade agreement in the pipeline for, I think, around 17 years now. And this is crucial, and this is perhaps big, considering she's coming here with a big team. Opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sakal, for the invitation. I'll just make one quick point, and I think that power has a new destination, and that's New Delhi. We've simply got to accept, we are becoming a major power. And you'll see one after the other. The fact that Madame von der Leyen has come with such a big delegation, it's the first time. And, there is such a churn in international relations. But we're the only country in the world that can talk to Moscow, that can talk to Washington, that can talk to the whole world. And this is, hats off to our own diplomacy, that we don't have any big enemies. We don't believe in that. So yes, there will be trade, there will be security, and the European Union needs us we're a strategic, trustworthy partner. So my opening remark is that power has a new destination, and that is New Delhi.
That's quite a strong and loaded statement. And why not? Why not?
Professor Pant, ambitious. No, what is wrong with being ambitious?
Absolutely. Professor Pant is smiling. I think he agrees with us. But Professor Pant, strategic significance for Europe in particular, the timings that I mentioned, President Trump's increasingly a sort of unpredictable approach towards Europe of late, newly announced plan to put a 25% tariff on imports, and this visit, there's a lot of conversation happening around FTA and all of that. So how do you see this?
Well, I think that is the guiding factor. I think Chitra is not completely wrong about the power business, but it's not as if India has become the power center of the world. It isn't. But the fact remains, we have become the most neutral body available to people anywhere. And the fact that this ball has been set only by Mr. Trump, who has made it clear that he's after the EU, he's after Canada, Mexico, and China. Now, who's left? India is the only one left. Now, what is it about EU? We already trade a lot with EU. The other factor that's there for India is we also do trade substantially with the US. I'm talking about commodity trade. And although it is not a deal killer for us, I do believe India needs to move its trade away from the US because, as I said, at least for the next 4 years, Trump is a completely unpredictable factor. So EU becomes even more important for us in trade-wise than it was in 2012, when for small things the whole negotiations fell apart. Remember, 13 years ago, these Indo-EU discussions had begun, also Indo-UK. Then Brexit happened, and now, of course, the big daddy of all, Trump, happened. So Trump is certainly a factor in making both countries or both blocs, India as a country and EU as a bloc, wanted to come together not only on trade but on other issues. For example, foreign investment. People keep talking about trade. Very critical part of relations is foreign investment. We've never had. had, except for the CCA except with the CCA country, with the EU countries, some of the ECM countries, we have never had a serious investment agreement as part of our trade. And secondly, remember that we have to now get ready with our trade in services, which is really what makes a
Okay.
big difference. I'll tell you why quickly in 2 minutes. All this talk about Trump is in fact a lot of waste of time, because he's only talking about commodity trade.
Okay.
He's only concerned about commodity trade, and he does not account for more than 13% of global commodity trade. So Trump cannot do anything seriously to the world in commodity trade, but the world has to understand that they need to get together. So even more important for India to trade with EU, India to
Okay.
trade with EU. And
And-
that's why I believe this is a particular significance.
Yes, and we're not making it about Trump, but it's about India and EU. It's about Prime Minister Modi's leadership and Rasula von der Leyen's, leadership and how they like. Yeah, so
This is all driven by other factors.
absolutely. So other factors, Professor Pant, and then ma'am can take it up. This proposed India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC. There's a lot of talk about that as well, which would serve as a building block, so to say, for India's strategy on the connectivity with its Western partners or Western continental partners. But we are also looking at counterbalancing China. So IMEC on the agenda?
Yeah, certainly. IMEC is certainly an agenda because most of trade is done by sea. 95% of the world trade is done by sea, not by air. So getting the IMEC corridor going is a very important part of it, because we've got some friendly countries in between, including, for example, Iran. And so I do believe that's a project India began long back, even prior to Mr. Trump taking place. So that's something which always the objective was how to push commodity trade along the sea. But the other factor, please remember, do not let me understate the importance of it. The EU is also coming here, certainly you'll see it coming up next few days, with the agenda on services. Now we are woefully unprepared on that. We have no idea, at least I am not aware of it. I know there's a government body working very hard on it right now. We have no idea how to negotiate trade in services, except we bring out that tired mode 4, let our professionals in, let our professionals. That seems to be the only thing we keep talking about, which no country really wants to do. Even we don't want to.
Okay.
So I think we need to very quickly get our act together as far as trade in services is concerned. And on commodities, I think the parameters are already laid down. We've already agreed to a number of things with Mr. Trump. On whiskey, we reduced on bourbon. I don't see how we can say no, but we will not do it for EU. So in spirits, it's possible to bring it down. In autos, you will see the same thing coming up. There's not such a big problem anymore. I think our auto manufacturers are much prepared.
Right.
So I do believe that there's a lot going forward. There's a outside impetus which pushes EU, all FTAs are pushed by third-party factors.
Okay.
And third-party factor is big today.
Okay. Chitra ma'am, mutually beneficial for EU and India, the way they see each other as potential sources of stability. And this at a time when you see so much of turbulence and bloc politics driven, geopolitical landscape. How do you see this visit in that light?
I am a hardliner when it comes to self-interest. I don't trust anyone except my own country. And I think geopolitics is nothing more than just self-interest. You should be driving your country's interests. And the EU, let's not forget, many of them are former colonizers. And, Mr. Macron recently made a statement that India is like a wealth of engineers. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, remember Mr. Ayatollah Khomeini saying we're a degree factory. So I don't like this, patronizing attitude towards us. And you can call me whatever you want, but we should be, as I said, power is now on our side. Coming back to China, when you asked earlier.
Yes.
Now, main trade in investments, that's TRIPS, trims and services. These negotiations happened at the WTO and I was reporting on them. Coming back to China, Sakal, let us not forget that we're the only democracy in the region. We have elections, we elect our leaders. I mean, we are a major democracy in the region and we should play that to our advantage. I mean, look at what's happening in Europe. They're in a complete turmoil. They don't know what's going on. The Europe is today very powerless. I mean, they're divided. France, Germany. Mr. Zelensky, as we speak, is on his way to the United States to make a deal with them without the EU. So we are a neutral power, as Mr. Pant said, and we should play this absolutely for our interests only.
That is happening, Professor Pant, but with most of the European commissioners visiting with Ms. von der Leyen, how do you see this as a big step for both European autonomy and for also enhancing the equation between the world's two largest democracies? Because why I'm saying two largest democracies, because EU has referred to India and the bloc as world's largest democracies.
Yes, that's true. No, I'm telling you, this is something which has worked for India for a long time. In fact, way back to the days of Kennedy and the Vietnam War, the 60s, the drought in India. Democracy has been our biggest calling card. But apart from that, remember that at the moment, the ball is slightly in our court, not because we are a very serious world power, the greatest in the world, but because the factor that the EU at the moment needs us more than we need the EU. In terms of commerce, because they have an issue. The Trump is on collision course with them. He's got, he's a very personal kind of person. He takes things very personal. He doesn't really care about the economics and things, but those things work out. He's got a personal problem with some of the leaders. And of course, that sidekick of his has even greater personal problems. So we are in the driving seat as far as that is why this whole delegation has come. Why didn't the delegation come in 2012 or 2014? Why have they all come today? Because I do believe we are in the driving seat as far as politics is concerned. I do believe we are also in the driving seat as far as trade and services is concerned. But remember, where I disagree with Chitra is, the principle of trade is give and take. There is no such thing as everyone does everything in their own interest. They do. But if you do things only in your interest and everyone does things only in their own interest, then in the history what happened in 1913, we can't do that. So there is give and take. I think it's been worked out. The negative points in 2012 were worked out. I think sticking points today will be CBAM.
Okay.
So there are 2 ways I would look at CBAM. I don't think the European Union Parliament will allow them to back out from CBAM.
Okay.
But what they can do is we can push them to a corner by pushing the horizon beyond 26. We can also tell them, look, you pay us. It's in our interest to ask them, tell us. The technology.
So what am I looking at? Am I looking at some major breakthroughs, Chitra ma'am? Fundamentally, how do you look at India, EU with their respective agendas at this juncture? For example, this whole re-energizing the EU-India strategic partnership roadmap, and the paper also says that deepening collaboration through EU-India TTC.
So I do agree with Mr. Pant that negotiations are give and take, but we are now in a spot where we can actually push them to the corner because the 2 largest economies, France and Germany, are in shambles. I mean, they are the ones who are, the big EU nations. So, I mean, I think that we should be, as he said, trade in services, whatever works to our interest. And this I will leave to the experts or people who are writing the documents, because we need to see where are we heading in the next 10 years. What is it that we need? Because the EU needs us more than we need them. And while you can say that these are technical details, I have learned from my reporting, that beyond a point, it's all political. I mean, the fact that Madame von der Leyen has come with her top commissioners in a first. What is that signal? That signals that they need us.
Yes.
So yes, let us sit down and figure out what's good for us, and look at the long term. And there's China, and there is we have to play it to our advantage. And I have faith in my government. I really do.
Okay. So, Mr. Subramaniam, though many of its initiatives are still in early stages, but both sides, in fact, ma'am, you can have a sip of water. Meanwhile, I can take this question to Professor Pant. So, I'm looking at tangible progress in trade, in investment and in technology cooperation. Now, what do we get to see at the end of it on the table in terms of moving forward? Professor Pant.
Okay, very simple. As far as trade is concerned, and please separate, it's important to separate commodity trade from service trade. They're two different things. Initially, negotiations are always about commodity trade. Service trade negotiations are much more protected. Now, anyway, on commodity trade, I don't see any issue. Their interest is spirits, which we have already made some give and take with the US. I don't see why we can't extend it to EU. And we've been already creating the ground for that within India, because we are looking also at Indo-UK FTA. The next comes the issue of automobiles. Now, we are not today in a situation of car companies being scared of the EU car companies. I don't see any problem. We are the largest exporter of parts in the world, with the biggest exporters of car parts. So we would always gain from increased trade, whether it is even more imports. We would still gain from a parts industry. Now we have two things on which India will obviously talk to them. I believe CBAM is a big issue. The carbon border adjustment mechanism, where they're putting some duties, 20 to 25%. The question is, make them part of the solution. Don't make yourself the problem. Say, okay, here's a solution. If you're not going to back out from them, and I think your parliament will not let you back out, you tell us who's going to finance this. What is the technology? And that's why I talk about foreign investment. You bring in the foreign investment which allows us to get the technology to avoid the CBAM problem. We are as happy. We have also made commitments in the World Fora. Mr. Modi has made commitments on reducing our own.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Professor Pant, I'm so sorry to cut you short here, because I really need to wrap up. One final and briefly, ma'am, in 30-40 seconds, robust Europe outreach we have seen, in the last 1 year by Prime Minister Modi. There's a certain direction to this whole India-EU ties. Little more than a year, we've seen Prime Minister visiting Greece, Italy, France, Austria, Poland, and then Ukraine. In that light, how do you see this India-EU outreach? Final word.
Final word, going well. The direction is going well. We are the largest market. I mean, let's look at it. I mean, we are 3 times the EU, but one final word I would say is that let's look at the environment. They're going to come up with non-technical barriers to trade and say, you can't do this, you can't do that. So you get polluter pays. Put some money in the environment section, because that's where we need, investments as well. Okay. So that's my final word.
Okay. Professor Pant, 10 seconds. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with the last part. I just said earlier that we need to get some help in technology. We really need it. No point returning the wheel, particularly in the context of the environment, because that's where we are headed to.
All right. So, like ma'am started by saying that the power center has the New Delhi, that's the destination. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us on this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Namaste.